Hi, my name is Lawrence and I'm not an expert. Well, I'm a doctor and I've led change at national level, but with regard to COVID, I'm not an expert, nothing like. But I'm increasingly worried, and I think that by the end of this video, you will also be increasingly worried. I'm worried, of course, about the desperate disease that COVID is. I know I've joked in the past about I might die, and my wife anyway would prefer a puppy. But recently this disease has come closer to us and we've seen firsthand how terrifying it is. And when I think about the awful and tragic toll throughout the world, my heart goes out to the sufferers. But I'm also worried about the road which we're going down in the UK and the way in which the media has been manipulated to suppress any dissension from that position. So I'd like to make 5 points, and here's the first. How dangerous is the road that we're going down of harsh lockdowns across the board, used not just on a short-term circuit breaker basis, but without an end in sight, as if that is going to cure the problem. In addition to the costs of the COVID, there is a cataclysmic cost of this approach. 750,000 jobs lost already, 300 billion cost this year, an unravelling justice system where people have to plead guilty to get out of prison, unravelling social fabric, unravelling families, unravelling even health. 20,000 years of life lost to cancer this year alone because of resources diverted to COVID. Not to mention mental health, drugs and so on. If this approach were a cure, maybe that would be something to consider, but the way in which we're using it without end in sight, it's not a cure. It will need to be carry on being done for a year, 18 months, until a vaccine or something comes to save us. Am I the only one who's worried that about this approach that the government is taking? No. Professor David Nabarro is the WHO Special Envoy on COVID for this part of the world, one of just 8 for the planet. And he says this: "We in the WHO do not advocate lockdowns as a primary means of control of COVID. We may have a doubling of world poverty by next year and a doubling of child malnutrition. This is a global catastrophe. We appeal to all world leaders, stop using lockdown as your primary control method. Lockdowns will make poor people an awful lot poorer. We are advocating a middle path. Develop local, highly developed systems for testing, contact tracing and isolation, protecting those most at risk. Get people on board with distancing, face protection, hygiene, isolating when needed, and so hold the virus at bay whilst keeping economic and social life going." That's the WHO official position. My second point is that nobody gave this message any space. No, only The Spectator, in which Professor Nabarro was interviewed. Otherwise we wouldn't even know what the WHO's position was. No TV, no radio, no press. As an example, on the 27th of October, a 10-minute slot on the Radio 4 flagship news programme PM, talking about the worsening crisis of COVID in Europe in Professor Nabarro's patch and the rebellion against lockdown measures, included a 6-minute interview with a Belgian pro-lockdown virologist without mentioning anything about any alternative position, and in particular not the WHO's official position on COVID. Those aren't the only examples. near the beginning of COVID, the SAGE group, which advises the government, which was chaired by Dominic Cummings, refused to publish even its membership or its advice. And so no less a person than the previous chief scientific officer set up an independent SAGE group, which then published a report. On the day that it published, no browser could find the report, no mainstream media covered it. It was simply expunged from existence. About a month ago, the Great Barrington Declaration, serious and well-informed scientists from across the world proposing the idea of focused protection, derided in the press. There was a letter in the Times, otherwise it wasn't covered, the content of it was not covered in any press, in any media, in TV, in radio. It was banned on Google. The further examples of the media manipulation. Let me just show you two slides from the Deputy Chief Medical Officer's presentation on the 20th of October, which was used to force Manchester into lockdown against its own judgment. This first slide, pale is fine and black is supposed to look 100% awful. But look at the scale. Black is in fact one case per 2,000 per week, mainly in the young. In the second slide, there is an increasing admission to CCU in the 65 to 84-year-olds. Now, that's serious. That needs action. They're right to have highlighted the importance of that. But look at the scale. Look at the point that that graph has reached. 1.6 per 10,000. If you do the maths, that works out at 130 cases in the whole of England, where there are more than 4,000 CCU beds. And that's against a backdrop of normally 50,000 people die every month in England, and 1,000 die per month of flu in the season. This is the data that was used by Boris to override local plans and to lock down even the under 45s, whose rate of CCU admission on their own graph was 2 per million per week. And just to reiterate, the WHO Special Envoy says, don't do that. So my first point, desperate road we're going down. Second point, media manipulation. Third point, well, is it a pipe dream to protect the vulnerable only? Well, nothing's going to protect people like me 100%, that's true. We've made some progress. The death rates are much lower now than they used to be, and even flu is being kept at bay to an extent. But surely we could do much more. I mean, who are the vulnerable? Besides those who are ill, there are three age groups, 65 plus, 45 to 64, and under 45s. Could we not think of some imaginative way of keeping those vulnerable age groups away from the non-vulnerable? Venues for those people to shop, to socialise, to exercise, to walk the dog, to eat and drink. And then some imaginative support mechanisms, for instance, childcare, for instance, replacing key people in the workplace. Shouldn't they all be getting vitamin D? Can't we improve track and trace in the very vulnerable? Maybe we should even be giving the vaccine to over 65 volunteers without being in a trial, just to see if it does some good. So, can we do focused protection better? Well, we have to. We have to. There isn't an alternative. So let's get on with trying to work out what those mechanisms might be. Two more points to make. Firstly, herd immunity. This isn't an illusion of the optimistic. It's not an all or nothing thing that we are never going to reach. It's something that's already happening. If you've had the disease, and fortunately, still there's only a handful of people in the world who've had it twice. If you've had the disease and you're out there in the community, you're one less person who's transmitting it. The R0 is lower. More people who've had the disease, the more herd immunity, the fewer will be transmitting. It's only the fact that everybody is locked down, that this herd immunity is not going up much faster than it otherwise would. Were we to do such a release, some young people would tragically die. God forbid. My final point is this. Why? Why is the government railroading us down this path of fiscal, social and health oblivion and going to such trouble to suppress any dissension? Well, the answer is I don't know, so I won't conjecture. But maybe just have a look at their fiscal recovery plan. £600 billion of infrastructure projects, and I'll just make 2 points now and maybe a separate video on the subject. First point, how much of 600 billion circulates in communities? The first couple of $100 billion goes in profits, in senior managers and executives' pay. And at the bottom end of the scale, 40% last year of London's construction workers were migrant workers. This isn't a plan to reflate the economy of communities. My second point is this plan preceded COVID. So, in summary, we're going down a desperately dangerous road against WHO advice, and the government is suppressing any dissension from their message. I'd just like to know why. Thanks for listening.